ladies and gentlemen. You all have 10 minutes, I have 11 because I came all the way from New York and I'll make it a New York minute. I'd like to start with an article that was published in the UK News. Got a kick out of this. A short guide to the Middle East. Sir, Iran is backing Assad. Gulf states are against Assad. Assad is against Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood and Obama are against General Sisi. But Gulf states are pro-Sisi, which means they're against Muslim Brotherhood. Iran is pro-Hamas, but Hamas is backing Muslim Brotherhood. Obama is backing Muslim Brotherhood, yet Hamas is against the U.S. Gulf states are pro-U.S., but Turkey is with Gulf states against Assad, yet Turkey is pro-Muslim Brotherhood against General Sisi. I get tired of reading it. And General Sisi is being backed by the Gulf states. Welcome to the Middle East and have a nice day. It's interesting because Turkey, I think, is kind of like stuck in between the rock and the hard place. European community don't want Turkey in there because it's really a Muslim state and getting away from a secular state. And if you ask the Arabs or the Iranians, they'll be like, Turks, they're not really Muslims. So it's really like the unwanted kid in the family. But Turkey, under the great leadership of Atatürk, actually chose to face West, secular democracy. Jews, Christians, Muslims, they lived under the same roof for centuries. So now we talk about Turkey at 90 and this new terminology, moderate Islam. So what is moderate Islam? I mean, can you think of like a moderate Christian state or a moderate Jewish state? Actually, no such thing exists, but this was a policy adopted by the State Department years ago. I don't know if you remember. It was the Green Belt of Islam against communism. And wherever we tried it, it backfired. It never worked. From Morocco to Lebanon to, you name it, Afghanistan, Iran, so forth, and so on. Because, you know why? Trying to use religion and trying to use ignorance is a dangerous game. Because ignorance is ignorance. I don't care where it is. It doesn't matter. It could be in Knoxville, Tennessee by a preacher, where whatever you do, you burn in hell. Or it could be a rabbi in Israel, or it could be in Istanbul. Because if this wasn't correct, if ignorance wasn't ignorance, this imam in Egypt, this is interesting, could he have said that you can have sex with your woman until 6 hours after she's dead? So much for my sex life. You taping this? My wife would kill me for this joke. But he says you can marry a girl older than 8. But this is my favorite. He says, if you listen to me to the T and do as I say, we men are distinguished. And if we listen to him, when we die, we go to heaven. And we get to choose between 70 virgins. So if you listen to this guy, of course. So it's like, it's great. It's like a big gentleman's club over there. And you walk, it's like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11, bring your sister. So I don't know what they're smoking, but you know, if ignorance is ignorance. Because if you're not ignorant, if you know, you could say, hey, guy, wait a second. What are you smoking? Where are you getting this from? And you could question him. But if you don't know, you follow him. So that's really the difference between secular and the moderate so-called Islam. There's an old Turkish saying that says you're better off to have a smart enemy than to have an ignorant friend. So the daily newspaper Zaman warns that the current developments in Turkey overshadow any attempts for democracy and the so-called package for democracy. Now this is important. Why is this important? Because this newspaper belongs to the Gülen movement. Turkish preacher, Fethullah Gülen, who has enormous influence within the government. Who is Gülen? Gülen is the most dangerous Islamist ever lived. Gülen himself has been living in so-called self-imposed exile in a big mansion in Pennsylvania, USA, for years, having left Turkey after public prosecutors accused him of working to foment an Islamic revolution. His followers have established schools in 140 countries, financial institutions, banks, media outlets, and hospitals. They claim this imam cares for people and education. He actually applied to get a green card as an educator. His highest level of education received is 3rd grade. So never mind the brainwashing and sect-like structures within the movement. This is good. In U.S. State Department diplomatic cables made public by WikiLeaks, American diplomats described Gülen's followers as Turkey's most powerful Islamist grouping, feared by the core institutions of the Turkish state. So Gülen and his cult owns and operates charter schools all over the world, and guess what? Including in our backyard in the United States. And he actually, his funding is coming from us, the taxpayers, and he makes millions on top of millions. His school, True Bright, alone receives more than $3 million from the Philadelphia School District alone. So he brings hundreds of his members from Turkey as teachers for children, as if we don't have enough unemployed yet qualified teachers here in the United States. And the numbers are interesting because Gülen schools are, they are the ones among the nation's largest users of H-1B visas. In 2009, they received government approvals for 684 visas. For Google, it was 440. So these teachers who come from overseas, they're not qualified to teach, and for the most part, they don't even speak the language. And he pays more than decent salaries, but unofficially, 40% of these salaries are donated back to the organization, conveniently in cash. So Gülen, Turkey at 90, Gülen and Erdogan, they're not really different because they had a deal. It's a strategic partnership. Gülen would secure votes for Erdogan, and Erdogan would protect Gülen's followers. On top of the list was mutual enemy, the Turkish military. Military's enemy not because they really get involved, but it's an obstacle for them. Not that they really care about, democracy. Prime Minister Erdogan expressed the way he feels about democracy many times. He said it was a tool until he got what he wanted out of it. He said democracy is a train where he could catch a ride until he reaches where he wants to be. And just like Gülen, who said, it's like a rent-a-cop, he said, rent district attorneys and judges if you need to. Get into the mainstream like blood in vein. Look weak and keep things strictly confidential until you're strong enough to take over. So Turkey now holds the world record for locking up journalists, leaving Iran and China scrabbling in the dust. More journalists were arrested in Istanbul one morning over Christmas than the Chinese managed the whole year. And who says we can't compete against China? So who's doing this? The big reformist, Erdogan. Because Erdogan, I think, he actually thinks of reform is a form where you fill out, you give it back to EU, and it becomes a reform. It's actually simple. They have two basic, simple rules, both of them. Rule number one is they are always right. Rule number two, if you have any issues, please see rule number one. The Ergenekon investigations, mostly based on allegations planned and served by Erdogan supporters and Erdogan himself, because he said he was personally the district attorney of this case. So the judge, the jury, and the executioner. With the help of the secret so-called witnesses, hundreds of people were sentenced, and then it was largely overseen by the Gülen supporters within the law enforcement and judicial systems. So now, I'd like to compare our own amendments against Turkey at 90. Is there freedom of speech, press demonstration? Nah, I don't think so. I'm sure you've seen the news and what's going on over there, the footage. Probable cause, search warrants? Not really. They can even blame some people and put them in prison for something they claim was written by them in 2003, showing some CDs conveniently found at their hidden spot, called in by an anonymous person and accepted as evidence. The expert's testimony saying that this was fake and this new font characters were not even introduced until 2007 was not accepted by the same courts. In these testimonies, there are some shopping centers and street names that did not even exist in those years, but the court refuses to accept it. So that's some justice and very fair speed of trial in our amendment, and that doesn't exist either. Journalists, doctors, teachers, students who were actually protesting for high college fees, and military personnel are held for years based on allegations by anonymous witnesses, some of them from terrorist organizations. So cruel, unusual punishments, that's the only thing compared to our amendment that Turkey has. So now that Turkey is out of the way, Turkey has democracy. I'm very happy. Because why? Because people voted for this man. That's what he says. People voted for me. You know what? I say Hitler was also able to clear majority of the votes in Germany. I mean, people voted for him, didn't they? So this man of democracy, Erdogan, now tells his citizens how to dress, what to wear, what not to wear. He tells you how many children you should have. Regulates the way you live from drinking to abortion, from how you should and should not socialize. He's an expert His expertise is cold fusion, and he's an expert gynecologist, miner, engineer, teacher, medical doctor, and a truck driver. The man knows it all. So in modern Turkey, with the great leader Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, women were able to vote before countries like Switzerland, France, and Italy. And for the most part, women are still treated as a piece of furniture. I mean, if you look at countries like Saudi Arabia and all, they can't even drive a car. So now I ask you about modern Islam. Secular or Islamic? And I know I need to wrap it up, and this is, I need to share this with you to show how Erdogan is predictable about Turkey at 90. He claims he wants no issues with neighboring countries. He wants peace. Yet he has made no secret of his desire to transform Hamas into an accepted member of the international community. In 2011, he told a U.S. audience that the Palestinian Party was not a terrorist group, and he was repeatedly vowed to visit the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip. Ankara has also provided Hamas with significant financial support, as much as $300 million, according to some estimates. So now there's a conflict, though, in Turkey between Gülen and Erdogan. Thank God for that. And it's more dangerous for Erdogan to have than the demonstrations on the street ever were, because a split within this party could mean the end of political Islam in Turkey. In this case, ideological differences play only a secondary role. Instead, Gülen's supporters seem to be more interested in posts and privileges. So his network uses trendy concepts such as dialogue, tolerance, but the organization follows an extremely strict set of rules. So I know I'm over my limit, I guess, and I could go forever. But what's going to happen in Turkey is an interesting question, because now that this happy ending coalition is over, the movement's goal is to see a new government, but one without Erdogan. The new leader in such government could be President Abdullah Gül, but he's not willing to. So what next? What next is that's a whole new discussion for another panel. Thanks very much.